Street photography can sometimes feel like a rather random process. You know, when you walk on streets, there are so many things that naturally prick your interest and that would prompt you to take a photo. But more often than not, when you actually take a look at the photo, it looks rather pointless and you weren't really sure why you took the photo in the first place. I think that it's fair to say that street photography reflects reality. Definitely it does to some extent, though for the most part it is an altered version of the reality as seen by the photographer, and it is in this process of working a scene in which a photographer takes something that looks otherwise pretty random and turn it into something that is, well, less random. Hello photographer, welcome back to my channel. It's Belinda and this is where we talk all about photography, from inspiration to camera techniques to editing skills so that you can take better photos. Previously in many of my POV videos, many of you have remarked that you really appreciate the fact that I was sharing a lot on my thoughts, and so I thought I might as well just take this to another level. So instead of just telling you what I thought about that final image that I decided to keep, in this video I decided that I would share the photos that were leading up to that one shot that I decided to keep, and also the shots that came after it. So basically I'm going to share with you my thought process when I pivoted between those different compositions while I was actually on the streets, and talk about why I decided to go with the photos that I chose. As of filming this video, there are quite a few things that were happening in the UK that I felt was worth documenting, and that would be the theme for this video. The first thing being the Euro Cup, which is pretty huge here in the UK, and also Pride Month is coming up. Quite a few companies and shops can already be seen putting up rainbow flags and decorations in celebration of the Pride Month, so that will also be the theme for this video. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. I'm not gonna pretend that I follow the games, but this flag seems to be begging for an obligatory shot. So I took out my camera and I did a test shot, which was in landscape orientation. This image definitely needs to be tweaked. I don't like how there are so many things in the frame that was competing for attention with the England flag. For instance, there's this black patch of reflection of, you know, some random stuff on the left, and then on the right there's this alleyway that also divides attention from the flag, which is really what I want people to look at. So I thought I might as well just shoot in portrait, which would be more fitting in this case. Now this looks better, at least it's closer to what I intended at the time. There were some people walking around, so I wanted to experiment on whether or not this shot would work better with or without people. So I took a shot while someone showed up as a reflection on the glass. And then I took another one with the person in a different part of the frame just to see what that does. Looking at these images, I decided that for this frame, it's probably better to not have anyone in the image because there's simply no reason why there needs to be people. So I waited a little longer for the streets to clear and took this final shot, and I cropped it a little bit in post. I came up to this salon and it seems like it could make for an interesting shot. There's a window sign erected in front, which is a thing I'm trying to document, but the displays inside the salon seems also interesting. So again, I started with a horizontal test shot to see what it looks like in camera. It looks alright. I mean, I like the warmth of the light that's coming through the window, but then I don't really like how this door is doing nothing at the back. This, by the way, is why I often prefer to shoot in portrait orientation. Perhaps it's a mechanism that I use a lot to crop out unnecessary details in a frame that isn't doing anything. So at this point, these shots look okay, but maybe there's a better angle to this. So I want to take a look at what's on the other end and hopefully find a better composition for the shot. Now I wanted to try incorporating the barbers as they worked through the displayed window and together with this sign. I know it's quite ambitious, which is why this shot massively failed, but I'm not really ready to give this shot up yet, so I tried shooting straight on from the door. this didn't really turn out particularly interesting in my opinion. I prefer my previous compositions if I had to choose. But then I also decided that I wanted to check out the other end and see if there's a better frame. So now it becomes clear that if I wanted to include the working barbers in the shop, it means that I'll have to shoot from this end of the scene. But then the compromise is that the rainbow colors on the other end on the sign won't show up in the image. So technically I can't have both in the same frame at the same time. In the end, I settled for this shot. I had to crop in quite a bit, but it looks alright. I was walking past this pub when I found a few interesting things going on in this scene. These flags on top, they were mini, they were really cute, and I thought they were absolutely worth documenting. And because of the darkness inside of the pub, these flags are standing out really well as reflections on the glass, and so I think if I work it out properly, this scene has a lot of potential. So first thing, a horizontal test shot. In this first shot, the focus was on the buildings. I thought it would be a good idea to try shift the focus back to the glass plane, so onto the flags. Comparing these two shots, I think the latter is the better idea. I took it from there and I started noticing a couple walking down the streets. I captured them as they traveled. So I took a shot when they were on the right, and then another one when they're in the middle, and finally another one when they are on the left of the frame. Looking at these three shots, I'm not quite sure if I actually want people in the frame. I'm not sure if having people would improve the composition because firstly, unless it was someone wearing really bright colors, or else they wouldn't really appear as reflections because the bottom part of the reflections are pretty dark. And secondly, I also think that because of the way that things are being arranged in this frame, having people could potentially add more chaos and it would result in a really messy composition without a good justification. That is of course not to say that you can't have messy photos that look beautiful, but that is not what I was intending here. I wanted it to, feel tranquil, to feel cozy, to feel mellow. That was the vibe that I was going for. So I did a few more shots without people, though to be honest, I still wasn't quite sure what I was doing. So I took a step back, looked at what's around me, and I saw this instead. There was an indent at this entrance to the pub, which could potentially give an interesting effect. So again, I went ahead to take some tests and see what I got. Somehow, I think they seem a bit off. I suspect that maybe I should reduce the proportion that the door is taking up. Right now, it looks a bit too much, so I moved myself towards the left. From this new position, I like how the ashtray is showing up. I think it goes well with the pub setting. But after all, I'm still not quite sure about this shot. I don't find it particularly strong, so I toyed with the composition some more. Though, all in all, I think this frame looks rather lackluster to me. Though, at that moment, my instincts were telling me that there is definitely something interesting going on in this pub setting if I work it out properly. So I stuck around for a bit. I turned towards the right and this was what I saw. I saw the England flag being hung right beneath the glass. So I sort of included bits of it into the shot, but still not the entire flag because I just assumed that photographing the entire flag would be too in your face and that the shot wouldn't be interesting anymore. So I took a succession of shots featuring the edge of the flag and tried to incorporate the interiors of the bar. I was moving myself to try out different compositions, mainly changing the proportions of the frame taken up by the flag. Now this angle seems to have tidied the frame a little bit, but I still felt quite annoyed by this purple pillar on the left. I think this was actually the worst composition of all out of the bunch. At this point, I think at least 15 minutes have gone by and I still haven't really made a shot that I was happy with, and so I was about to give it all up and started walking. But this was actually the first time I gave a proper look at the flag that was hanging in front of the window, and it dawned on me that this was the angle that I perhaps should have shot from. So I decided to shoot right into the flag. This first shot was focused at the things inside the reflections, so the window frame is technically out of focus. As I always do, I try another focal point, and so this shot resulted from placing the focus on the glass this time, essentially also the windowsill. I'm happy with the portrait shot so far, but I think it will also be nice to see what I would get if I were to do a landscape version of it. I instinctively thought that portrait would be better, and this time I think my gut feeling got it right, so I simply continued on with the portrait orientation for the remaining shots. I caught a man and hit the shutter when he was about to walk out of the shade of red. I think that way it adds a bit of detail on the lower left of the frame, which helps balance out the negative space on the upper right of the frame. I walked past this haberdashery and found a tiny strand of rainbow hanging from a massive scissor. This was the first test shot, which definitely showed room for improvement, especially in relation to the positioning of the scissors. Instead of placing it on the right, I think it might make more sense to place it on the left and instead include the threads mounted on the wall. I definitely think that this worked better as compared to the first frame, and so this was the base on which I worked my other shots. But then after taking a few shots, it became apparent that I was just taking those shots for the sake of taking it, and so I just stopped. There wasn't really a lot of noticeable differences in these shots, so I just settled for this one. As for this shot, I think I kind of just walked into this. It was just a fun quick snap, and so was this. I wasn't intending to take any serious shots here, so I didn't have video footage that go with it, but I think that the balloons were quite catchy. I found it to be quite a creative spin on the England flag, and so I took a snap. And these shots also happened way too quickly that I just didn't have time to pull out my video camera, and to be honest, when I took these shots, I didn't think that I would like them enough to share them with you guys. So what I saw was that there was this revolving glass door in front of a office building. So whenever someone wants to walk through the entrance, they start pushing the glass pane, which then picks up on speed. At some point, they leave the building, and so the glass pane then gradually just stops. So what's really interesting about this set of images is that they correspond to this cycle of acceleration and deceleration of the glass doors. In this first shot, there wasn't any motion really that was coming through because the person have yet to actually go through the door. I just simply took a shot because I noticed how the sticker was in rainbow color and I wanted to note that. But then the person starts going through the door, and so he starts exerting force, which is why we are starting to see a bit of motion blur in the reflections on the glass. And then in the third shot, the door accelerates to its peak, and then finally the door stops and the motion blur then dies down. I was actually debating between the second and the third shot. Honestly, I still cannot decide, though I'm more inclined towards the third shot. What do you think? It's Pride Month, and of course, Selfridges is going to put up rainbow flags. I think it could be worth getting a shot of a rainbow flag paired with a Selfridges flag, because there's something definitely that's worth noting. So I moved myself closer to the display windows and started with this shot. It's pretty standard, but that was actually where the idea of reflections kicked in. So I stepped away from the glass to cut away some of those unsightly, unwanted buildings on the lower right corner, and that resulted in this shot with the flag and its reflection both in the same frame. But then after a while, it became clear that because of the angle at which this flag was extended from the building, it's actually quite hard to get both the flag and its reflection in the same frame at the same time and having a composition that looks good to me. What I ended up doing was to only focus on the reflections. So this was a shot that I took, which I think looked reasonably good, except that the top of the flag was cut off and I didn't want that. So I adjusted my angle and I took another shot, this time including the entire flag in a bit of foreground. I think I especially liked how the diagonals were working as leading lines in this shot. I know in this video I've bombarded you with so many different shots that look incredibly similar, so don't worry, as usual, all of the shots that I chose finally will be put in a lineup in the end of this video. I hope that I've organized my thoughts in a way that it's easy to follow, and I do hope that you find it relatable, especially in relation to some of those very cheeky thoughts that would typically go through a street photographer's head. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!